Cal.
Hello and welcome to today's video, where we will explore the role of calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway in health and autoimmune disease. This is a complex topic, but don't worry, we will break it down for you in simple terms and explain the key concepts and findings. First, let's start with some background information. What is calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway and why is it important? Calcium is a mineral that is essential for many cellular functions, such as muscle contraction, nerve transmission, and enzyme activation. Calcineurin is an enzyme that is activated by calcium and regulates the activity of other proteins. NFAT stands for nuclear factor of activated T cells, which is a family of transcription factors that control the expression of genes involved in immune response, cell growth, and differentiation. Transcription factors are proteins that bind to specific DNA sequences and regulate the production of messenger RNA, which is the blueprint for making proteins. The calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway is a molecular mechanism that allows cells to sense and respond to changes in calcium levels. When calcium levels increase, calcineurin is activated and dephosphorylates NFAT, which means it removes phosphate groups from NFAT. This causes NFAT to change its shape and move from the cytoplasm to the nucleus, where it binds to DNA and activates or represses the expression of target genes. When calcium levels decrease, NFAT is phosphorylated by another enzyme called kinase and returns to the cytoplasm, where it is inactive. The calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway is crucial for the development and function of the immune system, especially T cells, which are a type of white blood cell that fight infections and cancer. T cells have receptors on their surface that recognize foreign antigens, such as bacteria, viruses, or tumor cells. When T cells encounter an antigen, they become activated and undergo a process called clonal expansion, which means they multiply and produce different types of T cells, such as helper T cells, cytotoxic T cells, and regulatory T cells. Helper T cells secrete cytokines, which are molecules that communicate with other immune cells and coordinate the immune response. Cytotoxic T cells kill infected or abnormal cells by releasing toxic substances. Regulatory T cells suppress the activity of other T cells and prevent excessive or harmful immune reactions. The calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway is essential for the activation and clonal expansion of T cells, as well as the differentiation and function of helper T cells, cytotoxic T cells, and regulatory T cells. The pathway also regulates the expression of genes that are involved in cell survival, proliferation, apoptosis, metabolism, and migration. The pathway is tightly regulated by various factors, such as the intensity and duration of the calcium signal, the availability and activity of calcineurin and NFAT, and the interaction with other signaling pathways and transcription factors. Now that we have a basic understanding of the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway, let's see how it is related to health and autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is a condition where the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues and organs, causing inflammation and damage. Some examples of autoimmune diseases are rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and inflammatory bowel disease. The exact causes of autoimmune disease are not fully understood, but they are likely influenced by genetic, environmental, and immunological factors. One of the hypotheses that explains the development of autoimmune disease is the loss of tolerance, which means the failure of the immune system to distinguish between self and non-self antigens and to maintain a balance between activation and suppression. The loss of tolerance can result from defects in the central or peripheral mechanisms that regulate the selection, maturation, and function of T cells. The central mechanisms occur in the thymus, where immature T cells are exposed to self-antigens and undergo positive and negative selection. Positive selection ensures that only T cells that can recognize self-antigens survive, while negative selection eliminates T cells that react strongly to self-antigens. The peripheral mechanisms occur in the lymph nodes and other tissues, where mature T cells encounter foreign antigens and undergo activation, differentiation, and regulation. Activation requires two signals: the first signal is the binding of the T cell receptor to the antigen, and the second signal is the co-stimulation provided by other molecules on the surface of antigen-presenting cells, such as dendritic cells, macrophages, and B cells. Differentiation depends on the type and amount of cytokines that are produced by the antigen-presenting cells and the T cells themselves. Regulation involves the feedback mechanisms that modulate the magnitude and duration of the immune response, such as the expression of inhibitory receptors and the function of regulatory T cells. The calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway plays a key role in the central and peripheral mechanisms of tolerance. In the thymus, the pathway controls the expression of genes that are involved in the positive and negative selection of T cells, such as CD4, CD8, CD3, and TCR. In the periphery, the pathway regulates the activation, differentiation, and regulation of T cells, as well as the expression of genes that are involved in co-stimulation, cytokine production, and inhibitory receptors, such as CD28, CD40L, IL-2, IL-4, IL-10, CTLA-4, and PD-1. The pathway also influences the development and function of regulatory T cells, which express a transcription factor called FOXP3 and secrete anti-inflammatory cytokines, such as IL-10 and TGF-beta. The dysregulation of the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway can lead to the loss of tolerance and the development of autoimmune disease. For example, mutations or polymorphisms in the genes that encode calcineurin or NFAT can affect their activity and function, resulting in abnormal T cell responses and increased susceptibility to autoimmune disease. Alternatively, environmental factors, such as infections, toxins, or stress, can alter the calcium levels or the expression or activity of calcineurin or NFAT, causing aberrant T cell activation or differentiation and impaired T cell regulation. Furthermore, the imbalance between the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway and other signaling pathways or transcription factors can affect the outcome of T cell responses and the maintenance of tolerance. For instance, the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway can interact with the MAPK, PI3K, NF-kappa-B, or STAT signaling pathways, or the AP1, NFATC, or NFY transcription factors, to modulate the expression of genes that are involved in T cell function and fate. The understanding of the role of calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway in health and autoimmune disease has important implications for the diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of autoimmune disease. The measurement of the calcium levels or the expression or activity of calcineurin or NFAT can serve as biomarkers for the detection and monitoring of autoimmune disease. The modulation of the calcium levels or the expression or activity of calcineurin or NFAT can serve as strategies for the prevention and intervention of autoimmune disease. For example, drugs that inhibit calcineurin or NFAT, such as cyclosporin A or FK506, can suppress the immune response and reduce the inflammation and damage caused by autoimmune disease. However, these drugs can also have adverse effects, such as nephrotoxicity, hypertension, or immunosuppression, and can increase the risk of infections or cancer. Therefore, more specific and selective drugs that target the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway are needed to achieve a better balance between efficacy and safety. Alternatively, natural compounds or dietary supplements that modulate the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway, such as curcumin, resveratrol, or vitamin D, can have beneficial effects on the immune system and the prevention or amelioration of autoimmune disease. However, more studies are needed to confirm the efficacy and safety of these compounds or supplements and to determine the optimal dose and duration of their use. In conclusion, the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway is a vital mechanism that regulates the development and function of the immune system, especially T cells, and plays a significant role in the maintenance of tolerance and the prevention of autoimmune disease. The dysregulation of the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway can lead to the loss of tolerance and the development of autoimmune disease. The modulation of the calcineurin NFAT signaling pathway can serve as a potential approach for the diagnosis, prevention, and treatment of autoimmune disease. Thank you for watching this video, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos on science and health topics. See you next time.
PharmaPal.